in 1951. So I'm 60 years old.
Baby.
And I've been studying Stonehenge since I was 20. So it's been 40 years of research. Now, Jane just now asked me, why did you get involved with Stonehenge? Well, when I was a little boy of 4 years old, my mother bought me a pack of puzzles. And she said, Bruce, if you can work this puzzle out, I'll give you another one, and so on. And from that age, I got involved with puzzles, and I became very good. And it was when I was 20, I joined the British Army. I was at Tidworth, and I set eyes for the first time on a fantastic puzzle. I didn't even know what it was. I just saw this object, tried to figure out what it was. And it's been an absolute obsession. I've done all my own research. I've just been out on Salisbury Plain for years and years and years. So I'm here today to speak for the very first time and tell people what I have discovered. So I'm going to ask you all now to take any preconceived ideas and put them in a little box and put them away just for this evening. So if you can, just empty your mind of any preconceived ideas and listen to what I've got to say. And once I've finished, you can take it back out again. So I'll begin, first of all, with the history. What we see Stonehenge today. So the first slide is the ruin. And let me do another one. There we are. And as you can see, there's not very much left of this. In the 1800s, a man would be there, and if you wanted to, you could hire a lump hammer for a halfpenny or a sledgehammer for a penny. And Stonehenge was used for many years as a quarry. People would go there, collect stones in barrows and take them away. And it's a miracle that it's actually lasted this long. There's been lots and lots of fires been made around it where people have attempted to break off stones. Some of the stones, they've had tractors to try to pull them out of the ground. What is left is what people couldn't take away. And that's a jolly good thing, that they made the stones so big, they knew when they put them there, as long as the stones remained, the information would remain also, would be carried through time. So we'll just go through the different parts of Stonehenge for those who don't understand what these different parts are. There we are. Now that's the biggest stones. This particular thing is called a trilithian. Tri meaning three. And we have another picture of these. There's 5 trilithians, which are freestanding stones with the lintels on the top. They're freestanding. And the next is the Sarsen Circle. Now you can see 3 lintels on this Sarsen Circle. And there are 6, I think English Heritage put 2 back. What happened was that they've all fallen down. There was 4 which were original. The other 2 have been put back, but I don't think they're in the right place. So originally there was 30 upright stones and 30 lintels, which went all the way around to form a perfect circle, 100 feet in diameter. And the top of the Sarsen Circle is absolutely level and flat. And yet the ground underneath, on the floor, there's a slight taper of about 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees. So they went to great pains, really, to get this absolutely horizontal and level. So, next picture. Now, these stones are called blue stones. They're much smaller. The Sarsen Circle, the average weight must have been 25 tons for the upright, and this big Trilithian's 60 tons. But these little baby ones, the blue stones, they weighed about 7 tons. And they go very deep in the ground, as do the Trilithians, very, very deep. And people have tried to pull these over, and they've tried all sorts of methods, but they go so deep that they've not managed to pull them out. And they're very interesting. The blue stones has caused a lot of talk. You know, people are saying that they come from Wales, and the Sarsen stones came from Marlborough. So, there we go. And there's the, can you see, the blue stones, more often than not, are in pairs. Not just at random, but came in pairs. Everywhere you look, there's two. So. Now, this is a very interesting stone. It's not the 2 stones on the top, it's the one buried. It's called the altar stone. That's the only stone I haven't got an answer to. I've found the object purpose of all the others, but I've got to admit I'm not perfect. I don't know what the altar stone did. It's not in its original position, so therefore I couldn't work out what its function was. The next one. There's the lintels. Now they're connected together, and they went all the way around, and they're about 2 foot 8 inches wide. So if you could go up on top, you could walk around. Quite big, quite substantial. And one of the questions what I had was, why are the stones so big? Why is it a circle? Why are they connected together? You know, this is what started to formulate in my mind. And in front of this circle, this one in the ground there is called the slaughter stone. And it was, everyone agrees, it was stood up on end, and it was originally one piece of a big trilithium. So it had, there was 2 of these and one on top, and it was part of a processional entrance, if you like. So, next one. So it's fallen down thousands of years ago, and that's called the heel stone. Again, it was part of a big entrance on the outer circle of Stonehenge. There's only one remaining, but there was 2 with one on top. And people look at the heel stone, in fact it's called heel stone for sun heel stone, that they look for an alignment. Now this alignment isn't there yet. Because there was 2 of these stones, the alignment went through the centre and was perfectly in line with the orientation of Stonehenge. But over the last 4,000 years, the sun has moved across because of the precession of the planet, and the sun has creeped towards that. Now in another 2,000 years it will be directly above it. So the alignment isn't quite there regarding the summer solstice. It's moved over a period of time. Next. And that is a small stone called a station stone. There's 4 of them on the outer perimeter, and I'll come to its function in the next couple of slides. There's 4 of these stones. They don't look like they do very much, but they have a purpose. Now that's the 1950s, when Stonehenge, a lot of the stones were angled over and falling down, so it was decided just to straighten them up a little bit. And I don't think they've done anything wrong. It allows people to see the stones where we think they were, so it's okay. I don't think they've done too much damage. And next one. Now, this is the thing they don't mention. Not many people know, but Stonehenge is the black dots. That's the Sarsen circle. In the middle is this horseshoe shape of the Trilithians. But around the outside, are two circles of holes. And there are 30 holes on each one. There's 30 uprights, 30 lintels, 30 Z holes and 30 Y holes. And these holes are 5 feet long and 3 foot wide and 3 foot deep. So they're like bathtubs. It doesn't show it very well on that picture, but the orientation to these bathtubs is the longest side is towards the stone. So and the question was for me when I found out that these existed, well, why would they make these holes? Now, I asked the academics, I read the books, and the idea was the holes were dug by mistake 300 to 700 years after Stonehenge was built. Now, that seems a bit strange, but anyway, I said, well, once they dug these holes, did they fill them in if it was a mistake? Well, no, they didn't. The reason they know these holes are 300 to 700 years after Stonehenge was built is because of the sedimentary evidence. So these holes are filled in over a period of thousands of years. A few thousand years ago it had just been hollows, but now it's all flattened and now disappeared. But they do exist. And there they are. They're very, very special to me. The YZ holes. And that's a picture showing Stonehenge, the YZ holes, and there's a small ring of holes right on the outside called the Albury holes. There's 56 of them. And if you add up the 56 and the 4 station stones, 60 again. And if you look at the Stonehenge, there's starting to appear as some sort of symmetry. This is what I was looking for. And that's another picture. That's the circle, 30 lintels, 30 uprights, the YZ holes, the station stones, you can see the 4, and it doesn't show the Albury holes, but they're there. And the 2 big stones, that's the heel stone and the slaughter stone. Yeah. Okay. And the next one. Now, the processional avenue. And that is exactly on the line of the summer solstice. And it's 50 degrees from north. And when the sun goes down on that day, it goes down at 50 degrees from north. And the reason they built Stonehenge on that position on the planet is because when you turn round and go to the winter, the sun comes up 50 degrees from south and sets at 50 degrees from south. So the two are connected. The winter and the summer solstices are connected exactly on the same line. So the sun comes up on this line, and in winter, on the winter solstice, in the evening it sets down on that line precisely. So that's why they built it there. It was where they believed the seasons connected. They were time revolved. It was a place which was connected to the heavens. So they go on. That's a plan view, a little map, and Stonehenge, the avenue, the cursus. Now that's about 2 miles long. Originally they thought it was a Roman racecourse, but now the belief is that it was a place where people would gather for processions. Thousands of people could line up and be ready with their banners and flags, ready to come up the avenue on the procession. And over in the corner is Woodhenge. Now that's a big building, and I've got some pictures on the slides to show you that. That's a very important part of this evening, because Woodhenge and Stonehenge were built exactly at the same time. the people who used Woodhenge also, built Woodhenge, also built Stonehenge, so they're connected. And the avenue connecting Woodhenge, you see the avenue goes off and away towards the river. Now, for some reason, about 100 years ago, they decided it was too complicated to tell you about the avenue which went straight across. And I've got the next pictures to show that. There we are. You see the avenue continues right down to the cursus. And that avenue was spotted by Sir Isaac Newton and also Arthur Conan Doyle. Independently researching Stonehenge, they mentioned and catalogued this avenue. And I've walked down it and I call it the Royal Approach because it's so gradual. You don't notice that you're actually on a hill. And you walk down, you feel wonderful. And you're approaching Stonehenge on the horizon, and the hills go away, and the hill in front. It's just amazing. And for me, when I go to visit Stonehenge, every time I go and approach it from the perspective of the Royal Approach. Yep, and now, this is Woodhenge, and next to it is the biggest earthworks in Europe. It's 1,500 feet in diameter, and it has now remnants of all types of different building and fires. It had about 2,000 people in this encampment, so they came from all over the country to this place to encamp, to stay for several days, and there's evidence to prove this. They found ditches with pig bones in and evidence of fires and accommodation. No problem at all. So people were coming from miles and miles away and meeting here. Now, Woodhenge, we all agree, was a place where people could meet, and it was a building. No doubt about it. Everyone agrees. It was a building. And debates would take place over several days. That's what Woodhenge looks like today. It's a field, and the holes where the original posts were have just been concrete blocks put in. So it's not, you wouldn't think there's much information there, but there is. And there it is again. And that's a better view. It's 150 feet in diameter. And the holes, I'll show it. The outer one is a circle, but the inner one is an oval, and the oval changes all the time. So there's a symmetry there. Now I'm a person who's interested in puzzles, so now there are 16 major post holes. And you can see there's a trench on either side where they had to put the post in, and then the men would have to lever it up and position it. And these timbers were huge. This was a big building, 150 feet diameter. That's bigger than Stonehenge. That's a timber. That's 30 inches in diameter. That was some building. It wasn't just a garden shed. That's big. And that's the interpretation in the books, the interpretation on Google. Now, when I look at this, I can see how they've made that roof to correspond with the 16 major post holes in the middle. But I can't imagine 2,000 people being inside there, all trying to look over each other in the dark, and okay, it's got a hole in the middle where maybe a speaker would be, but it's a bit crude, and it doesn't really explain anything. So what I did we start to look at these 16 major post holes. There's 32 holes behind that, which can be divided into twos, and I'd struck a line, and, and slowly but surely tried to formulate, could this mean, you know, what I did, I got all my bits and pieces at home and I made a model. Now the model is under one of the cloths there, you're going to see it later, it's a surprise. And the whole building appeared in my front room. I started to put it together like a three-dimensional jigsaw. So these drawings are just to show you how my mind was thinking, how I could find these different pieces to this building. And I also looked at the books. What sort of technology, how did they fasten logs together, so on. And that's the building I came up with. The 16 major post holes had to be exactly that oval to enable the frame on top for the apex and the roof to be built. The balcony on the outside where there's a ring of small post holes, so that people who were inside, it was like a great big bull ring with a roof, an auditorium, and where everyone could sit down and the speaker would speak, and if you wanted to go to the toilet you could walk back along the balcony and down and away, you didn't disturb the proceedings. And I had a chap from Bournemouth University build this computer graphics. It's not all that good, but it's good enough for people to understand that when you walked into this building, as you went in, on the outside it's very low key, it's only small timbers, it's got a balcony, and it looks round, you don't think much of it, but when you walked inside, wow, all these people would sit. And you can imagine, you start to get the idea these people weren't stupid. They were coming together, they were discussing things, they were having debates, they're going away, having a meal, coming back. You know, this is a civilization, a people who really were thinkers. So, to be able to build that, if I had to build that, when I looked at it, it's got the least amount of post holes to create it. If I'd have created it, I would have used many, many more. But it's absolutely fascinating. Ignore the bubbles. And that's inside. The computer graphics, I'm afraid, not too good. But you get the drift. Seating and great big timbers with flying buttresses. And yep. And there we are, another picture. Just to give you an idea of, it was all wood. Now, I've talked about Stonehenge and not told you anything yet. I'll just give you the background. I've given you my interpretation of Woodhenge. It was a building and we had debates there, so we now know where we are and we know they're connected by the avenue. So now I'm going to talk about the stones, where they came from, how they brought them here, how they brought them, transported them. Yeah, so that's the next step. So we're going from where we are today, how did they get there? So everyone agrees that the bluestones came from Preskelly Mountains in Wales. There's lots of programs about it, they've made films about it, I've been to lectures about it, but like I say, I've done my own research and I've read the original document, and it said that it was very likely that the bluestones came from Preskelly Mountains because 85% of the bluestone is exposed in that place. So it's probable. Now, I looked at the rock strata, I looked at the bluestones, and I got the stick. just here is an island, Lundy Island. And I've got a picture of it. There it is. This island has got bluestone deposits all over it, all exposed exactly the same as Preskelly Mountains. It's on the same rock strata. It had a settlement at the time of Stonehenge, in fact older, and I've found in the local graveyard on Lundy bluestones which have been took from circles on the island and used today, so you can go there and look at bluestones. And I've been told, I don't know if it's true, I need to research further with this, but I've been told originally there was a circle here on the island. Now, the bluestones which were transported to Stonehenge were over 1,000 years old. They'd already been dressed and cut and been used for something else before they were transported. And my suggestion is that they came from Lundy. And the reason being is Stonehenge is 51 degrees, 10 minutes, 44 seconds of latitude. And Lundy, at that point, 51 degrees, 10 minutes, 44 seconds. They're on exactly the same position. So I can understand when they were building Stonehenge, this wonderful place, that they obviously wanted to incorporate other, obviously something which was on Lundy, and so that the reverence and the everything that the bluestones represented was transported and placed inside Stonehenge. So I'm hoping that somebody somewhere will go to Lundy and check this out. I haven't got the facilities myself to take slivers of stone and put them under a microscope, but I think it's more likely, and a jolly good reason, to take the bluestones from Lundy to Stonehenge rather than the Preskelly. So we carry on. Now, the big stones, sarsen stones, the sarsen comes from the word sheep, because from a distance they thought they were sheep in a field. And I've got a picture, sheep and stone. And we all agree they came from Marlborough Down, and that's Marlborough Down, and there are sarsen stones. And they are 20 miles north of Stonehenge. So the big stones had to be transported all that way. Now, when you look at the map, they show you a direct line, 20 miles north to south. No problem, you would think. Now, I've walked the route, and that's the problem. There's a huge escarpment round Salisbury Plain. And in the Pewsey Vale, it's at its worst. That is Red Horn Hill. Now, to transport stones up that, impossible, in my opinion. And what I did was start walking. And I walked everywhere. I went east, west, everywhere to look which way did they carry the stones. And to the, I'm not losing the track here. To the east, to the west, I came across the River Avon. It's far too shallow, the bank's far too steep. No, not possible. And to go direct, not possible. So what I had to do was walk along the side of the escarpment, along the side of Salisbury Plain. And this escarpment, I followed it along until I got to Market Levington. And to my amazement, there's a gap. There's a valley with no incline, no obstacles at all. And I thought, this is it. This is the way they would have done it. They would have brought the stones down from Marlborough along the side of Salisbury Plain, through the gateway, and directly to Stonehenge. So I went to the local farmers and I got them all together at Markets Levington, and I put them to them. And one or two have actually been born in view of Stonehenge. They knew the land, and they all left me for 5 minutes and came back, and they'd come to a unanimous decision. It's the only way. So great that that these people, the local people, agreed with me. And the route isn't 20 miles north from Marlborough, it's actually 24, 26 miles to enable them to go all the way around the side and then through and then directly. And there's one village in between Market Levington and Stonehenge. It's called Rollstone. And that's my next subject. How do we move the stones? I've tried dragging stones. I've tried walking a stone, which means you fasten logs around every side and then put levers in and walk end over end. I've tried that. I've tried putting stones on rollers, like the Egyptians did, and the rollers sink into the ground. Sledges don't work. Nothing works. But then I remembered when I was a little boy, I had to do the cricket pitch with my friend. And we used to pull the roller, which was 2 tons, across the cricket pitch. And I went to a man on the oil rigs, and he said, "Oh yeah, we've got pipes, they're 2 or 3 tons each, but we just roll them along with 1 foot." And I think people at that time, if they cut a tree down, they would say, "Well, we can't lift it, but we can roll it." So this is the method I think they used. They rolled the stone. The shape of the stones, when you turn on the side, if you encase them in wood, they lose their weight. They can be rolled. So that's one chap. Another chap there, they've done that, and I mean that's very good, but not quite good enough. But in the right direction. Now that's interesting. British Telecom moved 2-ton blocks. 2-ton concrete blocks. These guys just walking them along. So it goes, the weight is just lost in the ground. So, and the next one. And that's my over-engineered attempt. I made a roller, a big one, and I over-engineered it, but it works. I think the people who built Stonehenge knew a lot more than me about moving stones. And I think the method would have been a lot simpler. It didn't need all that material in the middle. It could have been done almost like a dumbbell shape. So, next. Now, all my thinking on Stonehenge all came down to questions. Why is it so big? Why that diameter? Question, 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 question. Write them all down. And I had to come up with one common denominator, one answer which would answer every question. And what I came up with was a hypothesis at the time. Could it have been a building? Could it? If it had been square or rectangular, well maybe, but could it have been a building? So this is how they built buildings 4,000 years ago. They were round, they had a roof, it was thatched roof. I'm told by one chap who helped me a lot was Robin Heath. He's an expert in that time, what sort of woodwork they did. And he said buildings over 60 feet diameter had buttresses on the outside to hold up the outer wall plate of the building. Now I didn't know about the wise head holes then, I was just thinking of how would a building look 100 feet diameter, not 60, but bigger. So I was taking standard building practices and trying to apply them to Stonehenge. Could it have been a building? Now, that's the building called Rivington Barn. It's the oldest in use Anglo-Saxon barn. It's huge. And the roof was originally wood, and the roof went right down to the floor. So it's got a lovely shape. It's not round, I know, but it's the roof idea. They did have roofs, and they went all the way down. And inside, where the roof goes right down to the floor, they boxed it off for cupboards. So I looked at that. And that's the end view of the same thing. You can see it's very modern now, but originally it would have been... one of the questions I had was the length of wood required to build a great big building. And 92% of the country was forest. And not many people were cutting trees down back then. Now they were growing. And somebody said to me, well, oak trees don't grow that big, you might get 20 feet at most. Now I needed to span the circle at Stonehenge over 50 feet. And I thought, I'm not going to do it. It's not going to work. Well, I found a big book on trees, and there's a tree in Ireland, and it's an oak tree. And this particular type of oak tree grows 50 feet before it has the head. It's a gigantic tree, and the theory is, it still exists, this tree, the theory is that these trees were all over Britain, but they got chopped down and used for buildings and shipping and so on. And what were left is all the oak trees what didn't get used. Now, thankfully, I was watching television one day, and Fred Dibner was, he was looking at Ely Cathedral, and he said there were beams inside Ely Cathedral, 2 foot square, over 50 feet long, over 800 years old, in perfect condition. And I found this picture on Google, and it showed, I don't know if these are the beams he's referring to, but there's some big long pieces of wood there. So the material was available. The people at that time had very little in the way of technology, and they were great woodworkers. That's all they dealt with. You know, they had wood, earth, rocks, very basic, but they had great intellect, great intelligence. So, and they had the materials and the know-how. So this idea of a building is coming together. Now, what I'm starting to realise is Stonehenge, everyone thinks that it's a freestanding structure. The whole world agrees. But the Sarsen Circle are in the ground really deep, and they've been packed with wedges to make sure they don't fall over. But the Sarsen Circle, you'd think it'd be in the ground like teeth, but it wasn't. They were in the ground just enough to cover the radius. Some of them only 18 inches deep. And that's why they've all fallen over. And I thought, but yet, to look at this is for strength. The mortise and tenon and the tongue and groove, it's almost as if it's structural. And yet, put any weight on it, it'd all fall over. So this is, you know, I can see I was formulating an idea. Oh, by the way, these holes were made by flint. I've spoke to 4 different stonemasons. They got a flint, you put it on a stick, and you spin it around, and it drills into sarsen. With a hammer and chisel today, you could not make those holes. You have to use flint. So they knew how to work and cut and shape stones with flint hammers. And that's what I've come up with. There it is, Stonehenge, the Trilithians. Now these YZ holes, I believe, had stones in them. So the people who said these holes were dug 300 to 700 years later, they said, couldn't have been a building, couldn't have been. I said, no. They were dug at the same time as Stonehenge. The holes had stones in them, so they weren't holes, were they? The stones were removed 300 to 700 years later, and only then did they become a hole and fill in naturally. So they were the wise edge stones. So now it's not one ring of stones, but 3 rings of stones. Yeah. And that's another picture. Yeah. Now, at Stonehenge, they found hundreds of balls. This stone ball is about the size of a football. Some of them are like watermelons, some are like footballs. And they've been called stone molds. They're suggesting that these balls were used as hammers, and yet they're made of very weak stone. I don't think they were used as hammers. I think they used proper hammers with flint heads to chip sarsen and shape it and cut it. So these balls are in the museum next door. There they are. Now, that's my first drawing I ever made of what I think Stonehenge was. That was back in the days when I thought they were fire in the middle of the room, very basic, like a house. So I drew that. Then I drew that. I found out about the wise egg holes, but I got them in the wrong place. I put them in line with the middle of the lintel. I got them in the wrong place. So now, got them in the right place. Put the buttresses there. Now, I haven't got a picture, and I've seen a picture, and I've looked for months to try and find it. One man in the 50s climbed up to the lintels on the inside upper edge with a chalk, and I got the photograph. I lost it. And he drew the bit what had been dressed absolutely flat. So the little model of a lintel here, this lintel, the inside upper edge, only in the middle, is absolutely flat. And on top, again, dressed flat. The rest of the lintel, all a bit bumpy, you know, but that bit, exactly where the beam would fit. Exactly. And so something's starting to formulate. The idea that it was every lintel carried a beam. The buttresses went down onto these big stones so that there's no rotting insect or damp going to get in. And the whole of the weight of the roof could be transported, pressed, circumferential stresses going straight down through those beams. So therefore the sarsen circle didn't need to be strong. It didn't have to be dug into the ground because it was just carrying the vertical weight. But all the energy, all the weight of the roof would go straight down into the ground. So this is a fantastic idea, but still thatch roof at this time. Still thinking of fire in the middle, they're all walking around in. Now that's the building I came up with, and that's the first model I made. And you may ask, well, where did you get the shape? Well, I spent years looking at this shape. Goes down to the ground, we'll stop halfway. I did everything I could. And what I did was, I looked at the fact that every third beam went to the apex, and it's all equal. I thought, the roof's got to be equal. And slowly but surely, I realised it was only an idea, put it to like a V, and I thought, if the rain comes on this big roof, it runs down the roof, hits the edge, and it's channeled to the points. So there's no guttering, no pipes, the water just hits the edge and straight down to the point. So I then questioned what could be the material to cover the roof. Thatch is far too heavy. it would have had to have been a shingle roof, a single shingle tile roof. So I did look into that, and they did have shingle roofs for high status buildings at that time, although there's no evidence at Stonehenge of any wood. So, in my opinion, it was tiles which were pointed, so when you put them all together, it looks like a fir cone, or it looks like the underside of a flower. Look, Mike's got the thing I was looking for, there it is. So these tiles would go all the way around the building. And I went to a builder, and I asked about this possibility. And he said, the bubble's sniping, he said. He said, that's how they build roofs today. If you go round in a circle, that's how they would build it. And the tiles, you would have to start off with small tiles at the top, about 3 inches wide. And as they come down, they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, until at the right down here, it would be 18 inches across. So there'd be big ones at the bottom. And so it is possible. And the type of wood we looked into, I think it was larch, was the lightest one. But yeah. So I think Stonehenge was a building. And there's a great picture. That model, unfortunately, has gone. I've had several over the years. They get broken and damaged. Now, all the tiles went up to here, and that section there was open. So all the light, what came in from the apex, went everywhere in the building. And now I've been to Skipton Castle, has got one, and a few other places. The Pantheon in Rome, I went to see theirs. I've been in a lot of places to see how much light comes in. And that diameter is 16 feet, 8 inches in diameter. So it's a great big aperture. And everywhere it's at. And the other thing I discovered, big buildings of high status were painted with lime wash. So they were all white inside. And white reflects up to 90% of the light. So it would have been amazing light inside and looking up at the sky. And there's the structure without the roof. The buttresses on the outside, and the trilithians freestanding in the middle. And that's the covering. That's one of my where I lived once upon a time. And it's some wallpaper. I cut it out and put it on. And that's a computer graphics from Bournemouth University. And that is as well. That's what we made. We created the building at Bournemouth University. Now, I'm going to show you a short film, and then we're going to have an interval. Okay? So, I'm just going to click the button now. Ready? Take off this. Now that's all computer graphics. There's the sun in alignment, the Great Trilithian, the Sarsen Circle. We're on the summer solstice line coming back. And there it is. There's the sun. A puzzle that has never been solved until now. Now this is how it begins. There's the stone balls used as ballast to raise a stone. Different size balls. You put them in and then they cascade out, you reload again until eventually we've put them all and fill it with soil. And then we can work on this platform to create the Sarsen Circle and the Trilithians. Raise the soil again. There it goes. So you could build this and alter your workstation. Now that's something I'm going to describe later. There's the roof covering. They built the building and then removed the soil. And then it stood up for itself. So there it is, the building. This is the slaughter stone. You didn't see the stones. You went inside what was a dark descending place, and you went inside, and there was this magnificent building. And there's the aperture. So now we're going to have an unveiling of my models and some pieces I'd like to show you. We can have a drink of tea or coffee. I don't know if there's any tea or coffee. And we'll have a short break. Then, the real deal. What we've got now is easy. What I'm going to tell you in the second half is where I'm going to give you the whole ball of wax. I'm going to tell you things which even I found very difficult to believe, because when I came up with this theory, people said thatch roof, fire in the middle of the room, and just keep it basic and we may accept it. But no, I went with my findings. I went with what I realised they were capable of doing. So that in the second half, there won't be very many pictures. I'll have to describe things about the mathematics, about the symmetry, etc. And I just hope, once you've seen the models and so on, it'll give you an idea of where I'm, what I'm coming at. So we'll now take a short break. Thank you. Deep breath. I'm ready to go. Now the next phase, the next stage, is something that took me by surprise. When I started out this journey of discovery, I had no idea what I was going to find. So it all began with Indigo Jones. It was the artist for James I in 1611 or thereabouts, 400 years ago. So Stonehenge has been a mystery for 400 years. But it's been there for 4,000 years. And a chap asked me, this is the difficulty, how do you know about these stones? Do they channel to you? Do they talk to you? I said, no. I said, you look at the orientation, the distance apart, the height, the size. It's in formation, like within the army, in formation. So when you read a book, which is paper and ink, does it channel to you? It tells you things what happened 100 years ago. It's by the orientation, the distance apart of the ink spots. Now Stonehenge was built 4,000 years ago, and it was a monument in the truest sense of the word. They knew as long as the stones would remain, the information would be carried. Buildings of high status were made in such a way that they could be rediscovered. Buildings of low status, higgledy-piggledy, it didn't matter. But Stonehenge was the most important building in the world. And what I've discovered on my journey is the symmetry and the mathematics. I built this model in my front room, and I had two men working with me. You see, I'm not very good with my hands. But Paul and Reg were qualified joiners. They made the model. And all the way through we're building this model, they didn't believe in what I was doing. It's too good. It's too this, it's too that. But as we were working, we happened to mention, I haven't got my stick, but every third beam goes to the apex. The distance to the stone. This stone is 1/3 of the diameter of Stonehenge. The Z holes, 1/3 of that distance. So we're thinking threes. And then Paul came to me and he said, I've just seen something. The Sarsen circle is exactly 1/3 of the height of the building. Isn't that amazing? I didn't figure that out. And I thought, what else have you found? So we started to look. This row of lintels, half the height of the building, 2/3 the height of the building. When you stand in the middle of Stonehenge, the distance to the stones is exactly the height of the building. This is interesting. When you measure from point to point, on my model you can do it, you can measure the distance, the 10-pointed star. When you stand that up, it's the height of the building. When you go to the V, what goes in, it's the distance of the Sarsen circle. The angle of the roof, I put it where I thought was right. I asked the builder, is that right? He said, yeah, it's about right, mate. When I measured it, the base is 3, the height is 1. Number 3 again. 3 rings of stones. 3, 3, 3. So then I started to look for more, and it just all started to happen. I realised it was almost like that gold plaque they sent on Voyager. It was an information. Anyone would look at it and say, no, it's a load of alignments, mate, but it doesn't make any sense. But to a trained eye, it's everything. They knew that someone would come along and figure it out. And do you know the Sarsen circle? 100 feet diameter, the thickness of the stone, measure the inside radius, 300 feet exactly. So they went to great pains to make it so that the ratio fits exactly the same. So, just going to branch off a little minute. I met some people, and one of them said, did you know that henge means hang? And I said, well, yes. They used to call it. Hang means hanging in the air or hanging by the neck. But then somebody started to call the Trilithian horseshoe a hang or a henge. Then in the 70s it became, the soil circle became a henge. Then it became a circle. Now everything's called a henge. But henge means hang. Hanger. Hanger. German name. And he said, if you measure the distance from this wall to this wall for the roof, it's called the hang of the roof. This is called the hang of the roof. What locks down. So Stonehenge is descriptive of a great big building. Even today they call aircraft hangar. Yeah. And then I met another farmer, Alan, and he said, do you know how to get them stones out of the ground, boy? And I said, no. He said, you dig a hole at one side, on the longest side, dig a hole and build a fire, and the fire cracks the stone, and if it doesn't, throw a bucket of water on it. Now I've tried to do this, and it goes, the stone goes like clay, and you can lever it out and take it away. Now Alan didn't know, but every one of these holes has had a fire in it at one side. And you read in the book, it's called a hearth fire. So in their opinion, they sit in the hole and the fire's on the other side, and you can have this fire. Hearth fires. What I'm saying is archaeological evidence to prove that there were stones in these holes. So, going back to the building, the roof covering made of tiles, the water would have run all the way down to the points. Now I believe that it didn't just run off, it went through a hole. So the edge of the building, the water went in this hole, you didn't even know where it went to. It went into a cistern inside where no one could see it. And we go into churches today. Now this is what I call an interpretation. I've got a lot of information to back it up, believe me. But when you go into churches today, there's a little tiny font, you can dip your fingers in and do the cross. I believe that's something which has come down like a remnant through time. In Stonehenge, they had a place where you could take refreshment. You know, you were in this building, there were proceedings going on. There was no water anywhere else, no source of water for miles. But people back then carried a cup. We know they did. They didn't have a flat bottom cup like today you can put down. It was a radius bottom. You can go to the British Museum and see the Ringlemere cup. It has a radius bottom. And the people would have taken their cup and took refreshment and carried on with the day. So there was, this water was very valuable, it was accessible for people. And so I've lost my track of the slideshow. Here we are. Now, this building, you didn't see the stones. You approached it, let's say I'm a foreign dignitary. You approach Stonehenge, and there it is on the horizon, and you see this, what almost looks like a stealth bomber in the distance. Great big powerful building. And as you approach it, up the processional avenue. At that time the sun would have been above the building. You're already starting to feel a sense of anticipation. And as the processional avenue dips, the stones would disappear. But you didn't see the stones. The apex would go and almost disappear. You could still see the apex. And as you're walking forward, it's not getting any closer. It stays the same. And then, as you come up on the last minute, the whole thing appears. You walk through the Trilithian archway. You stand before Stonehenge. The sun is on the apex. You walk into what you think is a dark descending place. It looks like a barn. When you get inside, they close the outer doors. They open the inner doors and you walk into the biggest shock, the most amazing sight you've ever seen. It would have been astounding, absolutely astounding. Here we are. This great big stone stood up in the middle of the room, the Sarsen Circle, and it appears as if every Trilithian is holding up 3 roof beams. It looks like these great big pillars of strength are holding up the roof. But it's only when you walk forward you realise there's nothing holding up the roof. It was like God holding up the roof. Stonehenge, literally the roof is hanging there and nothing holding it up. So I'll just go to the next picture. Can you see the Trilithians? Now they're in a horseshoe shape. Why is it a horseshoe? Why are they stood in the middle of the room? It was only when I went inside with a small camera I saw it. It was as if I'd walked inside. The Trilithians are all different sizes. The one farthest away is the biggest, 26 foot high. The next one, a couple of feet down. The next set, smaller still, in a horseshoe. But from the point where I'm standing at the entrance on the summer solstice line, all 5 are equal. The one farthest away is exactly the same size as this one. And it's a perfect circle. It's been made as an illusion, an optical illusion. And when you walk forward, it would have been amazing. and you stand in the middle of Stonehenge. And one of the great things about Stonehenge is the acoustics. I got a BBC engineer to look at this, and he said that acoustics are astounding because it's a cone. It's amplified back. So I went to buildings, similar buildings in Paris, and went inside, and amazing acoustics. So Stonehenge had a wooden floor. Now, it took me 2 years to figure it out because I was putting planks on top of wood like they do at home. But it wasn't. The floor was made of great big thick timbers, all going together. Like, that's a very crude drawing. For the reason it took 2 years, you look at the circle, you look at the building, you look at everything. What was in the middle? What was, statue? What? An idol? And it was not anything but what I call a rotor. It was Stonehenge. The plan of Stonehenge was in the centre of the floor, and that enabled every 3 beams for every point. Can you see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3? It all goes with the symmetry of the building. So the whole floor radiated out from this central point. So it was the place itself which they held in reverence. And there's the symbol. The Sarsen circle would have been 3 feet. The actual circle on this would have been 3 feet diameter. The star would have been 5 foot diameter. So I would have stood on this. And everything's 3. So I thought, okay, I'm standing on 1. The building's 2. Well, where's number 3? And it was when I looked up at the apex. There's the building. Oh, go back. When you look up at the apex, where the 10 beams connect, it creates a star. Exactly like the one I'm standing on. So you've got 1, 2, 3. Now, this is a picture of a bigger model. I didn't do very much with it. It was on display in Plymouth, in the town hall. People taking my picture there. I didn't have the outside of the building at that time. And many people came to see it. And the overriding question was, every beam goes to a stone, but the apex is wood. I put a wooden block in the top, and I had to hold my hand up. Maybe it should have been a stone. That's what I said. And at the end of the week, there was 3 people waiting for me, hippies, New Age travellers. And they said to me, could it have been a crystal in the roof, in the apex? And I just went, oh my God, how am I going to get rid of these people? Everything has to be crystals, everything. Oh. So I packed up, thank you very much, bye-bye. And I went home. And I couldn't rest. Days went by. I was angry. I didn't want to look at it. Do you know, I had to look at it. As a scientific person, you cannot dismiss things prior to investigation. You have to look at it. So reluctantly, I looked at it. I thought, okay, if there could be a crystal, if. And I put it in there in my mind. And the first rays of sun on the summer solstice would have hit the crystal, refracted down into the room. And I thought, wow, come to think of it, all day, when you looked up at the apex, you wouldn't be able to look because the sun, if it was out, would dazzle. So it would look like the sun's in the apex of the building. So the idea of glass came in. I went to Dartington Crystal, the glass manufacturers. I spoke to this historian. He told me that glass had been around for thousands of years before Stonehenge, that they were quite capable of making glass. All the materials are there for glass. little people made beads because they lived in earth floors, fire in the middle, making little beads. But this wasn't anything else. But do you know what this? I think of it as their NASA. This was their centre of excellence. This is where people, all the technology, all the power, everything they had was on display. And one of the things that Stonehenge was built for was to carry the secret of glass. Now, for a long, long time, I've been taking this model in my mind and thinking about this wooden floor. So every time it rained, I had people running up the roof and putting covers over the hole. Because the rain would have wet the floor and it wouldn't work. So if they could make the crystal, could they make the 10 sheets of glass to fill the hole? That was a big question, and something I never ever wanted to tell anybody about. Hard enough to just say it was a building, but to tell them that Stonehenge carried the secret of glass. Okay. There's the end. There's the hat. Now, this hole, this aperture, I now know, after many years of looking at the building, the fabric of the building, everything about the building, is so incredible. They would not have missed what I believe, what I've seen. These last 10 pieces of wood, I believe, were cut at an angle, and they were silvered, so that when you look up I've done tests at Bournemouth University. When you look at those beams, the angle is wherever you are inside the building will only reflect sky. So imagine when you looked up at this hole in the roof, it was just a hole. The beams, you wouldn't have been able to see them 50 foot up. You wouldn't have known about glass. You wouldn't have just seen this great big hole in the roof. And you can imagine what it'd been like for people inside Stonehenge who didn't know this secret. And the rain starts to come crashing down. You can hear it pelting on the roof. And yet there's nothing coming in. They would have gone outside and got wet and come back and said, this is impossible. So, that's looking up at the crystal, that's the 10 beams which connect. And that blue object there, is the actual size of the crystal at Stonehenge, which would have fitted in the apex. So you can see where each beam would have fitted, and the glass would have been put in, and you would never ever know. And there's another one there. I've made a 1/3 size. Dartington Crystal made me that small 1/3 scale model, which it's okay, but I want one that big. There's the crystal. There it is. Yep, we've got the real one here. And that's looking down on Stonehenge. And the thing I wish I'd done earlier. Do you remember before we looked at the barn and it went to the floor? Stonehenge goes down. And I had to put the wall in where the cupboards go. And I did this about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. It was another discovery. When I put the wall in, this section here, what I discovered was the distance from side to side is exactly the height of the Sarsen circle. And so is this. All the 30 walls are equal. I'm just astounded. And the height of the wall is half the height of the Sarsen circle. I thought, I don't make this up. This is amazing. So once I'd got that across there, And I could see it in my mind's eye. 8'4" to the top. There's a beam in the middle of each wall. 30 beams, 30 walls. And then we've got 30 doors. There's a door here. 10 doors. Remember the font where you got your water from? That's in the middle of that wall. So it was here, under that beam was a font. When you put that across, behind that was big enough for something I've been looking for 14 years. I've been looking all over Salisbury Plain, find out where they went to the toilet. It's one of the biggest mysteries. And there it was. And if you put a door on every one of those walls, a door on either side of that font, exactly, it fits exactly. There's now 30 doors. So you've got 30 walls, 30 doors. I mean, it's all too good. I mean, I could never, ever have done this. And there was an architect in Plymouth at the museum. He saw this model, he came to see me. And he was many, many years in architecture. And he looked at this building and he said, "You could never have made this. This is the most astounding building I've ever seen. As architecturally, it is amazing. There's no cement, there's no screws, no nails. The whole thing locks itself together by gravity. There's no way you could have invented this." Amazing. So, oh, there's the toilet. Can you see? That's the bit. Now, there's the door there and a door there. Yeah. And above, that wall actually covered this stone, but there was the cistern, remember, for the water as well. So it all fitted behind there. It looks a tiny little space, but it's big, believe me. There's bags of room to go in and do the business. And I've made, this morning, I made a model, this morning. I'll come out and get it. I made this. Couldn't sleep last night. Got up early this morning and I thought, you know, that triangle, what fits here. Now imagine that distance across those 200 inches. 16 feet, 8 inches across there. That triangle. It's a big space. And I thought the room would have been triangular. So you can sit down and it's a nice triangular room. But no, Stonehenge would not have corners. So I chopped the corner off until it happened. I didn't do this, it was there already. What you have is a hexagon. You can examine it after the talk. But there's a beautiful hexagon fits in there. So there is no corners really. And you can walk in, close the door, sit down. And very private. And also accessible from the outside. I should imagine there would be a water closet, a water container of some kind, to be spirited away at a later time. So, next picture. So we've got quite a few things inside. We've got the toilets, we've got the walls, we've got the doors, we've got the entrance, we've got the light, we've got all the beams going up into fresh air and sitting in nothing. And the outer ring was even silvered, so it caught even more light. The whole looked bigger than it's 16 feet, 8 inches, it looked bigger. So we've got this wonderful building. And the foreign dignitaries have come in. And the next question I had was, you've got to ask these questions. The main trilithian is very special because there's a slot in the middle, been almost machined, it's that good. And it was about 3 inches wide, going all the way up 26 feet, in the middle of that there. The front face of that trilithium is a big arc. So my computer mind is trying to figure this out. The back face of that trilithium is absolutely vertical, beautifully polished. So why is it flat? Why is it curved? Why the slot? Why that high? All these questions coming into my mind. And remember, there's also the idea, maybe there's a mirror inside as well. That was in the back of my mind. They definitely knew would have been able to make a mirror. So, I hope you're all following me. I believe they had on the front of that trilithium a magnificent symbol. And I know what it was. It was the symbol of the building. It was 100 inches from point to point. And it was covered with tiny little mirrors. All triangular mirrors. Mainly in silver, but some with gold. It would represent the sun. And it sat there at the bottom of that trilithium. Now, the slot. If you put a rope in that slot and it goes up over a wheel inside the slot. Now, I'm not saying everybody had a wheel, but this was NASA. The wheel would not be seen because the rope goes over the wheel. It's hidden. And I believe the symbol would have gone up into the air. Now, how did they do it? For that symbol to rise up would need a counterweight on the other end of that rope, because that symbol was heavy. And my computer mind went through every single possible answer, and then it stopped. The answer was, there was nothing on the rope. How could that be possible? How can that be possible? And the answer, because I'd thought of all the materials they could use, the answer was, inside the rope, for a section of that rope, inside it, was a chain of gold. Gold is over 1.5 times heavier than lead. They could easily put the counterweight to the symbol inside the rope so that it would descend. And there was a hole in the ground between the trilithiums. There's wedges which creates a slot going down. The rope went up, over the wheel, down, inside the hole, back up and underneath. So imagine somebody pulls a little peg, the symbol rises up, it reaches it right to the top. And at that moment, the light from the sun, which has come round past noon at its apex, come round back onto the summer solstice line, hits the mirror, and then straight onto that symbol. Now imagine when it went up. Somebody pulls that peg and it goes up. Wow! All the little mirrors. The whole room would be like one of those glitter balls you have in a disco in the 50s, you know. Wow! And it would be like the sun was shining through the stones. They wouldn't understand how this was happening. And this amazing thing would have happened. But it didn't end there. It would be there for about a minute, maybe 2, and then it would descend. And the way they did that was, in the rope they had a small section of water, so when the water was in its container, it would be heavier than the symbol. When it goes round the bend, the water's slowly going out, and when it's gone through the hole, it then becomes back So, I'm not saying I can say 100% this is a fact, but I've looked at it like a jigsaw puzzle. I've got all these pieces, the curve, the black face, the slot, put everything, the light, the angle at which the light comes in. I mean, I got somebody, an expert from America I've had a lot of help on this. So that everything fits, so that you look at all the individual pieces of the jigsaw, and that gives me the shape of the space in the middle. So I've had to put that last piece into place. So Stonehenge was a place where it just doesn't get better. You went to Woodhenge, you had debates, you had arguments over a period of days, and only when you finally came to a decision, only then would you go to Stonehenge. This was a place of authority, a place of power, where declarations would be made and so on.
And magic.
So, I didn't mention the blue stones. The blue stones were in pairs. Now imagine they were sticking up out of the ground, around the room, some of them are, inside the trilithians, inside the horseshoe. And if you count the number of pairs, there are 7. And I believe they were the supports for great big seats of power. The chairman, the throne. So there were 7 seats inside Stonehenge. And maybe they had a star on them, so there's 7 stars, I call them. But there's 7 seats. And if you look at society today and count the number of seats, there are 7 seats. There's religion's got a seat, the Queen, the House of Commons, the House of Lords, the medical profession, the universities, and religion. Each have their own seat, their own place, so that these decisions which were decided upon, for example, the priest would say that obviously he had to have a say because they didn't want to offend the gods. So Stonehenge was a place where you could do declarations, you could do, maybe a trial would take place. You went in and there was seating enough and people would judge you, and you would go in on the main door and go out the other way. So finally, I built Stonehenge. I had an idea that it was a building. I'd got some idea of what it was like. And then somebody came along, just like those hippies, and said, "Do you think King Arthur built it?" And no, don't do this to me. But when I looked at Stonehenge, it was built by one man's intellect. One man. Everything about Stonehenge is so good, I don't believe that it was collective. It was one man's intellect. When you measure the height of the Sarsen Circle, it comes down to the inch. It's actually 200 inches high. When you measure the diameter of Stonehenge, it's 1,200 inches diameter. The height of the room, 600. You get it? So you've got 200. Then I started to look at the crystal, 20 inches. So I've got 20 inches, 200 inches. The overall size of Stonehenge is 100, the third, 166.6, 2,000 inches exactly. So it's 2,200, 2,000. The more you look at Stonehenge, it's all been built to the inch. Now that inch isn't exactly right. You've got stones which are, but the mathematics within it are all what I call mathematical absolutes. And that came from one man's intellect. So, King Arthur, Merlin, we've read all the stories. But the origin of those stories was from a cleric called Wace. And he went to the king with these wonderful stories which origins were deep in Celtic legend. These stories were thousands of years old. And he took them to the king, He loved them, he took them to France. These stories were embellished. Guinevere and Camelot, the Knights of the Round Table and so on. If it was today, they'd put Beckham and Posh Spice in, they'd make them all footballers. But what they did was made them contemporary. But I think the original story that King Arthur, two men, an architect, a mathematician and a genius, and there had to be the man who financed the thing and authorised it. The other, so there's a king and an engineer. And there they are, these two, the greatest story in history. And the first words ever found in 1135 about Stonehenge, Merlin built Stonehenge. Arthurian story, you know. So I went to Winchester, looked at the round table on the wall, the replica they've got up there. And when I started to study it, I looked at it and realised the diameter in relation to height is exactly the same as the Sarsen circle. And it all fits. I can picture a situation where the whole table's dismantled. And I've actually got a model there which works. You can dismantle it and reassemble it. It wouldn't be there all the time, only on special occasions. That people could close off Stonehenge. You could have drapes hanging down the gaps between the stones. You could have servants coming in and providing refreshments, whatever. And I can see people having a banquet, whatever. But this is all open to interpretation. These are my theories. The building is real. A theory is something nebulous, something we're not sure about, something you need to question, investigate. I'm happy with the building. It stands up for itself if you really look at it. But what I'm suggesting, the other things, the round table, and a few other things, I've got to say, okay, my interpretation. I'm not, but I've got as far as I possibly can. I've told you everything I've come across. I could have played safe and just kept it simple, but I've gone and told you even about the toilets. So I'm open now for anyone to question me about anything about the building or anything at all, and if I can, in my power, I can give you my interpretation. So we've got another 15 minutes just to look at the models. We can talk and discuss things about the model if you wish, or you can ask me any question you like. Okay, thank you.